Warning: the following video contains explicit language, which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Got this video here from the Humanist Report that I think we ought to see. Then we can talk about that after.
Back on the campaign trail, so many Republicans told us that Donald Trump was actually the candidate for peace, including his running mate, J.D. Vance, despite Donald Trump's blatantly neoconservative record from his first term. But now that we're on the cusp of war with Iran, what are those same people saying now? Well, some of them, I'd imagine, aren't saying much. In fact, a lot of them are probably sitting awkwardly in silence, hoping nobody notices how foolish they look now. Some of them are just supporting it, manufacturing consent for the war that Donald Trump wants to start, and using the exact same playbook, mind you, from the Iraq war days, not changing a single thing. But having said that, though, there are some prominent voices in MAGA world who are actually choosing to speak out against war with Iran. The problem, however, is that they're tap dancing around the real culprit here, which is Donald Trump, because, of course. And instead of choosing to directly condemn his saber rattling against a country that poses no threat to us, these cowards are instead choosing to oppose the prospect of war with Iran in the most passive-aggressive way I have ever seen. And they're doing this despite Donald Trump greenlighting Israel's attacks in the first place, and now saying it's possible that we do get directly involved in a confrontation with Iran. But before we get to the tepid condemnations from MAGA diehards, if you can even call it that, I do want to explain how he is already complicit if this does happen, and talk about how Trump is taking the bait from Netanyahu as well as Republicans who are trying to goad him into a full-blown war with Iran. Jake Johnson of Common Dreams reports, U.S. President Donald Trump suggested Sunday that American forces could get involved in the intensifying military conflict that Israel started late last week with a barrage of attacks on Iran, prompting large-scale retaliatory strikes and warnings of a prolonged and catastrophic war. Trump told ABC News senior political correspondent Rachel Scott that the U.S. is not currently involved in the conflict, which is false. The U.S. has helped Israel shoot down Iranian missiles, and American fighter jets are reportedly patrolling the sky in the Middle East to protect personnel and installations. One Israeli official told the Jerusalem Post that there was full and complete coordination with the Americans on Israel's early Friday bombardment of Iran, which set off the conflict. Now, on top of that, Donald Trump tweeted, Iran should have signed the, quote, deal I told them to sign. What a shame and a waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Now, I'm not sure how he expects millions and millions of people to evacuate Tehran immediately. That sounds completely infeasible. But with this tweet, he's either approving of more bombs being dropped by Israel on Iran at best, or at worst, he could be signaling that Israel is about to do something much more nefarious in Iran's largest city, which means lots of casualties. Now, I'm not going to speculate further on what that is, but I do fear the worst given what's already happened in Gaza. But let's be very clear here. Donald Trump was never, ever serious about peace with Iran. He was never serious about securing a deal with Iran. And this should have been obvious to every single person with eyes from the beginning, since he is the one that chose to unilaterally withdraw from the JCPOA. This is the Iran nuclear agreement that Obama negotiated, which Trump withdrew from in his very first term. The International Atomic Energy Agency verified multiple times that Iran was indeed in compliance with this deal. So they weren't creating a nuclear bomb, and the West was at peace. But that angered Republicans and Netanyahu, who were using fears of Iran becoming a nuclear power as a justification to one day invade them. So by unilaterally tearing up the JCPOA, Trump made war with Iran that much more likely. So it was cartoonishly stupid for anyone to think that he was ever negotiating with Iran in good faith after his actions got us to this point in the first place. And here we are yet again on the cusp of war with Iran, thanks to Donald Trump, and now he's escalating instead of de-escalating. And Benjamin Netanyahu is now doing everything in his power to goad Donald Trump into a full-scale invasion of Iran, not only by provoking Iran into retaliating against them by illegally bombing them in the first place, but by tailoring his pro-war message to Donald Trump in American media, which it's astounding that they're allowing him to make this point. Nonetheless, here's Netanyahu saying why our country should go to war with Iran for him.
These people who chant death to America, try to assassinate President Trump twice, killed 241 of your Marines in Beirut, killed and injured thousands of American soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq, try to bomb a restaurant in Washington, D.C., chant death to America, burn the American flag. Do you want these people to have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to your cities? Of course not.
It's Tel Aviv, tomorrow it's New York. I understand America first. I don't understand America dead.
So he's saying without evidence that Iran was behind both of the Trump assassination attempts. And when he was asked about whether or not he has intelligence on this, he claimed that it was from one of his proxies that told him this, meaning he made it up. And he knows that some isolationist, libertarian-minded MAGA Republicans might be against war with Iran because that's not very, quote, America first, whatever that means. But he's responding to that claim by making an appeal to Trump directly by arguing that it actually is in America's best interest to invade Iran since an attack against the U.S. by Iran is imminent. Now, that is complete and utter horseshit. That is not going to happen. But if he can work Americans into a frenzy and get Trump to think that this is personal, then maybe, just maybe, he will get Trump to do what he's been trying to get a U.S. president to do for a very long time, which is go to war with Iran for him. But aside from the personal appeal that he's making to Trump, he's also rolling out the same old tired playbook about Iran getting super close to having a nuclear weapon. And I've got to tell you, this is nothing new for those hearing this for the first time. We've been told that Iran was this close to getting a nuclear weapon for decades now.
Take Iran about 12 months to enrich enough nuclear material for a single nuclear weapon.
United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken is warning that Iran is potentially just months away or less from nuclear breakpoint.
Iran is 2 months away from a nuclear weapon, and it's a victory to get them 1 year away?
Iran could be less than a month away from building a nuclear weapon.
Netanyahu has made 2 tough-talking TV appearances, saying that Iran is just months away from making a nuclear bomb.
What is important to understand is that you have to dismantle the entire terror empire, and especially before its main practitioners, the terror states of Iran and Iraq, acquire nuclear weapons. And this, I think, has been a wake-up call from hell. It is telling us, you have the power now to act.
So for decades now, Iran has been this close to getting a nuclear weapon, but yet the worst fear of the West has never actually come to fruition. That's really strange. It's almost like what they were saying was bullshit. This lie has been used again and again and again to manufacture consent for a war with Iran. And to be clear, I don't think that any country should have nuclear weapons. That includes Iran and the United States. But in the event Iran were to ever get a nuclear weapon, it's obviously for the sake of deterrence, which is reasonable given the threats that they've faced from both Israel and the United States for decades now. But they want you to think that if Iran gets a nuke, they're going to drop it on our heads since they hate us for no good reason. But in actuality, Iran isn't going to do that, and they have a good reason to hate us if they do indeed hate us. See, our leaders don't tell you this, but the United States and the United Kingdom teamed up to overthrow Iran's democratically elected leader in the 1950s, Mohammad Mossadegh. Now, why would they want to do something like that? Well, you see, he wanted to nationalize Iran's oil supply so Iranian citizens could benefit from it instead of Western powers like the UK. But we couldn't let that stand, so we installed the Shah, who was a brutal puppet dictator who let the West continue to exploit Iran's natural resources, which then led to frustration by the Iranian people, who chose to rise up and overthrow said dictator by theocratic revolutionaries in the late 1970s. So suffice to say, if Iran hates us, they have a very good reason to hate us. But that doesn't mean that they're going to nuke us the second they get a nuclear weapon, even if nobody should have a nuclear weapon. Common sense dictates that they'd want a nuclear weapon to stop us from invading them again, since, you know, we've done that in the past. But the problem is that if you hear about these facts, you might feel a little bit apprehensive about the prospect of war with Iran and think that it might be illegitimate, which is why these inconvenient facts aren't mentioned by war propagandists, because they want you to think that war with Iran is good because it benefits them. See, it's much easier to portray them as the bad guys and us as the good guys and claim that us invading them is actually good for the Iranian people and they'd be happy to welcome us, giving them freedom. But I mean, this is the same shit that they told us before they invaded Iraq, and take a guess who was beating the war drums back then as well. Of course, it was Benjamin Netanyahu.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And I think that people sitting right next door in Iran, young people,
and many others will say, the time of such regimes, of such despots, is gone. There is a new age. Something new is happening.
That clip was from 2002, and as you can see, it aged very, very well. But here we are again, 23 years later, and they're not even bothering to switch up the playbook, not even tweak it a little bit. It's the same shit they sold us to get us into a war with Iraq. And it's because they think that we're dumb enough to fall for the same line of bullshit again. But you know what? They might be right. They might actually be right about that. You've already got right-wing media and Republican politicians working in lockstep to manufacture consent for a war with Iran to varying degrees, and the reason why they're saying things like this is because it's effective, unfortunately.
I would urge President Trump to go all in to make sure that when this operation is over, there's nothing left in Iran regarding their nuclear program. If that means providing bombs, provide bombs. If that means flying,
busting bombs,
whatever bombs. If it means flying with Israel, fly with Israel.
Look, I think it is very much in the interest of America to see regime change. I don't think there's any redeeming the Ayatollah. He is filled with hatred.
Is this another Iraq, or is it something entirely different? Well, let me tell you what makes this moment unlike anything else we have faced before. First, this was not a call to war. This was not a land invasion. They do not want what we want. We choose life. They literally choose death. That is as clear as it is. Do you choose life or do you choose death? That is a culture of death.
It is so ironic to see an American who supports Israel accuse any other nation of having a culture of death. Israel is carrying out a genocide of Palestinians as we speak, and that genocide is overwhelmingly supported by the population of Israel. America killed more than 1 million Iraqis in the name of self-defense. And Americans overwhelmingly supported that war at the time. Not to mention, we let our own citizens die due to a lack of health care. Our HHS secretary is basically against modern medicine, including vaccines. Republicans were talking about sacrificing human beings just a couple of weeks into the pandemic for the sake of the fucking economy. Our country is the personification of pro-death. So maybe Glenn Beck should have a little bit of self-awareness before judging other countries. And he says that they don't want the same thing as us, but I've got to ask, who's us, Glenn? Because you don't want the same thing as me. You're more pro-death than any leader in Iran, full stop. But, you know, putting aside his lack of self-awareness there, you can see that there's already an effort to gin up support for the total annihilation of Iran's nuclear program at best and regime change at worst. And right on cue, mainstream media is working in tandem with Republicans and neocons to manufacture consent for a war, with news outlets like CNN platforming Netanyahu, and also Yoav Gallant to tell us why America is obligated to go to war with Iran for Israel. And I've got to ask, are there any other war criminals wanted by the International Criminal Court that we can consult with for their expertise before we make a decision? Perhaps we can bring out Dick Cheney and George W. Bush, or create an AI of Henry Kissinger to get his advice while we're at it. It is ridiculous. Like, this is what happens whenever the entire establishment gears up for war. They line up in one direction and they push one cohesive narrative, which begs the question, where's all the supposedly anti-war voices in MAGA that told us that Donald Trump would never start a new war? Where are those people? That's what we're going to turn our attention to now. And spoiler alert, the most prominent voices in MAGA, at best, are only tepidly condemning the prospect of war with Iran while making sure to avoid criticizing Donald Trump like the plague. And instead what they're doing is they're calling out people encouraging Trump to go to war with Iran because perhaps, I guess they forgot that as president, Donald Trump has agency here. It is a very delicate balancing act that they're doing, but nonetheless, here's how some of them are choosing to thread the needle. Tucker Carlson, for example, tweeted out, the real divide isn't between people who support Israel and people who support Iran or the Palestinians. The real divide is between those who casually encourage violence and those who seek to prevent it, between warmongers and peacemakers. Who are the warmongers? They would include anyone who's calling Donald Trump today to demand airstrikes and other direct U.S. military involvement in a war with Iran. On that list, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Rupert Murdoch, Ike Perlmutter, and Miriam Adelson. At some point, they will all have to answer for this, but you should know their names now. Right, so they all have to answer for this, but not Donald Trump himself, who actually is in control, who greenlit Israel's attacks on Iran in the first place. Interesting. But let's come back to Tucker Carlson here, because Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted out this long-ass fucking screed saying anyone slobbering for the U.S. to become fully involved in the Israel-Iran war is not America first / MAGA. Wishing for murder of innocent people is disgusting. We are sick and tired of foreign wars, all of them. But if you read this whole thing, which I'm not going to do, she didn't address Donald Trump's warmongering a single time. See, everyone within MAGA isn't really America first, according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, if they're pro-war. Although Trump, the chief chud, leader of all MAGA, who's leading us into a war with Iran right now, just tweeted that America first actually does include war with Iran, because stopping them from getting a nuclear weapon is America first by his standards. Moreover, Iran warhawk and fellow MAGA chud Mark Levin responded to Marjorie Greene saying, "Who died and named Marjorie Taylor Greene the queen of MAGA? Trump is MAGA. He received 77 million votes. You're a little-known politician from Georgia. Hate to break the news to you. We're Team Trump. Go Trump." He's kind of got a point there, Marjorie. Maybe this tepid approach of you saying, "Oh, well, gee golly, guys, war with Iran just doesn't seem like a very America first thing to do," isn't fucking working. Perhaps you should actually condemn the president himself, who ran on America first, more directly. See, this is what happens when you base your movement on a wannabe dictator's vague slogan that is completely bereft of policy substance. But she's not alone, because going back to Tucker Carlson here, even though he talked tough and named names in that tweet that we saw, there's one name that he absolutely won't name, and that name is Donald J. Trump's. Don't get me wrong, he'll name Trump to give him a sloppy blowjob, and when I say sloppy, I mean so sloppy Trump has to wipe his ass afterwards sloppy, but he refuses to condemn Trump's warmongering, even though Trump is the one with all of the power right now, which doesn't make any fucking sense. Nonetheless, let's hear him out.
I actually really love Trump. I think he's a deeply humane, kind person, and I am saying this because I'm really afraid that my country's going to be further weakened by this. I think we're going to see the end of American empire, obviously. Other nations would like to see that, and this is a perfect way to scuttle the USS America on the shoals of Iran. But it's also going to end, I believe, Trump's presidency and effectively end it. And so that's why I'm saying this.
What do you mean by that? That's coming from you. That's
you get. Look, I knew Bush. I knew George W. Bush. We had, family connections to Bush. I knew Bush personally. I still see Bush sometimes, and of course, he hates me, and he does because I criticized him on Iraq. And that war is the sum total, from a historical perspective, of his administration. But I knew him, and he had all kinds of plans for the things that he wanted to do. But once domestically, right, to improve the country. Right. And you may agree or disagree, but in his mind, he wasn't just about the invasion of Iraq in March of 2000.
Oh, no. He was going to redo Social Security.
100%,
he had all his,
100%.
All types of, he was going to take care of the entitlements issue.
And he really thought it was going to work.
Yep.
And you could laugh at that or whatever, but the point is, the second you get enmeshed in a real war, not a fake, let's go bomb the villagers and declare success, though we don't even have a good track record. Why are the Houthis still there? No, there's a whole other question, right, which is how prepared is the U.S. military for a real conflict? And the answer is totally unprepared. Scary unprepared. I don't think people understand that. But anyway, the only reason I'm saying any of this is because I really, really care. And it's been, what a disaster for me personally. I mean, it's like the last thing I wake up, all these texts, well, I can't believe you're so evil, you hate this, that. I just want to restate, I don't hate anybody. And to the extent I do hate people, I try to repent of it. I don't want to hate anybody. I really don't. I just don't want my country to be further weakened or destroyed by another one of these wars. And boy, if you can't connect the dots after 25 years of this shit, you're either too dumb to participate in the conversation, or you're, like Mark Levin, just a liar who doesn't care.
Embarrassing. The same people who portray themselves as alpha, unapologetic truth tellers have to tiptoe around what they really want to say so as to not offend their dear leader. Maybe we should call him Cucker instead. Hey Cucker, why don't you pop his balls out of your fucking mouth and stop complimenting him and actually criticize him harshly if you genuinely want to stop a war with Iran, you fucking coward. Oh, well, gee whiz, sir, another war would make you seem like Bush, and you don't want to go down in history as another Bush now, would you? Right. Let's not pretend like you also didn't support Bush's invasion of Iraq yourself, Cucker. You called Iraqis semi-literate primitive monkeys, so let's not do revisionist history about your own record, because the internet never forgets. But putting that aside, even though Cucker went out of his way to avoid hurting Daddy Trump's feelings, it wasn't enough, because Trump tweeted, "Somebody please explain to Kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon." Well, it turns out walking on eggshells for him didn't actually make a difference in the end. So you not only fell out of Trump's good grace, but you also look like a pussy too. Good job, Cucker. But let's also address the elephant in the room, and by elephant I mean Sloppy Steve, who says that he also doesn't support war with Iran, but like Cucker and Marjorie, he lacks the spine to call out Trump directly.
I'm a big supporter of Israel.
Yes.
And I'm telling people, hey, if we get sucked into this war, which inexorably looks like it's going to happen on the combat side, it's going to not just blow up the coalition, it's also going to thwart what we're doing with the most important thing, which is the deportation of the illegal alien invaders that are here. If we don't do that, we don't have a country. And you just see right now, they're doubling, tripling out. This is actually potentially a real civil war in our biggest cities. And President Trump has to have our backing. And this came out of nowhere.
Did it though? Because Israel has wanted a war with Iran for decades, and they've been trying to get every U.S. president to go along with it, but you dipshits elected a mark like Trump who might just be dumb enough to do it. But his pitch is pretty hilarious, because he's saying that war with Iran would blow up the MAGA movement as if it was premised on policies or a principled opposition to war and not Trump dick riding. And he also gently says that this wouldn't be in the best interest of the MAGA movement, as if Trump wouldn't know what his supporters would go for or wouldn't go for. He knows that it's a cult and they'll go for whatever the fuck he says they should go for. And Bannon makes it seem like he's speaking to Trump supporters in this clip, but in actuality, he's really relaying this message to Donald Trump because he's too much of a pussy to be blunt. So he's trying to use reverse psychology on Trump to convince him to not go to war because it interfere with the racist things that Trump wants to do. It's not the war that's inherently bad because people will die. It's that war is bad because racism is more important to Steve Bannon. Incredible logic here. And we've just gone over a couple of examples, but how many other supposed anti-war Trump supporters who boasted about Trump being the candidate for peace are also choosing to just defend this or remain silent? The answer is, there's a lot. There's a lot of cowards, but there is one who actually chose to be principled and forcefully condemn Donald Trump, and that individual is Dave Smith. And while I have no respect for any Trump supporter, I at least appreciate him condemning Trump directly and not mincing words and following up said condemnation with a call for consequences.
Yeah, Donald Trump looks, and man, I supported him this last year. I apologize for doing so. It was a bad calculation. At the time, it seemed like the right one. But he should be impeached and removed for this one. Wow. And not on some not on some ridiculous Nancy Pelosi. Of course, the Congress will never do it because they're all a bunch of corrupt hacks.
This is the one thing they support. This is
Donald Trump should be impeached and removed for this. All of his supporters should turn on him. It's the absolute betrayal of everything that he ran and campaigned on and everything that he stood for. And I will say, despite the fact that, Donald Trump supporters have been labeled like a cult following, and that certainly is true for a percentage of his supporters, he is going to lose his coalition over this.
We'll see about that. But even though he still gets a Fell for It Again award, I've got to say that it is really nice to see somebody admit that they were wrong and even apologize for supporting Donald Trump. Apology not accepted, but I do appreciate the gesture and I give you extra credit for calling for his impeachment. Having said that, though, even though you're owning up to your mistakes, there were people like myself, as well as Kyle Kulinski and others who were warning you that this was going to happen. It's not something that, we predicted on a whim. We don't have crystal balls with the exception of Kyle Kulinski. We said this because we made fact-based assessments because we looked at Trump's foreign policies from his first term. It's really not rocket science. All you have to do is look at what he did in his first term, and past behavior is an indicator of future behavior. It was already obvious to everybody that was paying attention that Trump was not anti-war, quite the contrary. And that's not to say that, Biden or Kamala were doves, but this idea that Donald Trump would have brought about world peace is extremely fucking delusional. Now, I'm not saying that that's what Dave Smith claimed, but if your main concern was no new foreign wars, you were foolish to ever think that Trump was on board. He's always been a warmonger. You just wish-casted his foreign policy positions on him that he never actually had. Nonetheless, I don't want to shit on him too much because I am thankful that he's at least one of millions of Trump supporters who's actually willing to directly call out Donald Trump. And the question is, will others follow suit? And the answer is probably not. And I say this because the Elon Musk kerfuffle taught us that no matter how hard you go after Donald Trump, it's always better in the end to have Trump as a friend than to have Trump as an enemy, especially if there's money to be made or if you have an audience or constituents who are part of his cult, because they don't want you to deviate from what he wants because he is cult leader, after all. So if Trump does do the unthinkable and gets us into a war with Iran, I fully expect most of his little sycophants to be completely on board. That is, until years after the fact, which is when they'll pretend like they were against it all along. And in the future, when people dig up this clip of me saying this, when I'm proven right, I want future viewers to know that I'm not basing my prediction on magical thinking. I'm basing my prediction on past behavior. See, I grew up in the Iraq War era, and it was genuinely radicalizing, to put it mildly. The things that they said to get us to invade a country that didn't attack us was wild, and I never fell for it as young as I was, as conservative as I was at the time, though all of my political beliefs weren't necessarily formed yet. But the collective deja vu that we're all feeling is a warning sign that things are about to hit the fan, and we should maybe not let it happen this time. Let's not let it come to that this time. For once, let's actually stop gobbling up the fucking bullshit that's being shoved down our throats by the mainstream media and neoconservative warmongering politicians. Let's actually use critical thinking for once and unequivocally and resoundingly say no to war. Not just because it wouldn't be in our best economic interests, but because the lives of the Iranian people who'd be disproportionately affected by this, they actually matter. Life matters. And the fact that so many people don't give a fuck about what would happen to the Iranians is disgusting, but it's so on brand for America.
Okay, so from all the things that I've seen today, and things that were happening yesterday, I mean, I guess a lot of people are under the assumption that the United States is going to end up in war with Iran because we're helping out Israel. I had somebody comment on one of my videos here, and I can't remember the person's username, but I suppose you could go back and see for yourself, who said that, defending Trump, and everything that's going on, that, well, at least we don't have a war. Well, that was their only response, I guess, to, why it's so good to have Trump. Well, now, that doesn't sound like that's going to be an excuse to use anymore, because he's leading us right into one, and he doesn't seem to care that, he's going back on his word. In fact, like what was said in the video, everybody that supports Trump is trying to go through mental gymnastics to try to defend this guy and what he wants to do. Or what he's aiming to do, I should just say. And like always, Israel is always saying Iran's got nukes and everything, even though there is no evidence to suggest that. Just because they have the ability to make nuclear-powered plants does not mean they have the ability or to have created any nuclear weapons, okay? Besides, with the technology that the world has today. Okay, let's think about this for a minute. With the technology that the world has today, we can detect nuclear missiles even in their silos, okay? So, if there were fucking nuclear missiles anywhere in Iran, we'd have known about that, okay? The satellites and stuff that we got, and we have a lot of them, they would have picked it up by now, okay? So the fact that we haven't already gone to war with Iran over this matter suggests that they've been following the rules, and Iran knows very well, okay, that this is something that they cannot hide. All right, this is something they cannot hide. All right, sorry here, I had to readjust my camera here. Okay, yeah, so there hasn't been any deviation from the agreement that was imposed on Iran not to make any nukes, okay? But Israel wants to see that country change in a different regime, and they have wanted to do this for a long time, okay? In fact, they want to have dominance throughout the Middle East, okay, which is why they pushed us to go to war with Iraq back, after 9/11, okay? This has been their plan all along. And the United States was never dumb enough to fall for this plan. They never had any proper justification from Israel to say that, oh yeah, we need to do this or anything like that. Israel's never been able to come up with a justifiable reason. So what they do is they make Israel a possible target for terrorist, activity, and basically just say, if you don't help us, we're doomed. And of course, that plays on everybody's heartstrings that Israel could suffer. And so this is what they've always done. They've always played us like a fiddle here. And Trump is like Kamala Harris said, Trump is one of those kind of people who can be easily swayed. You just flatter him enough and he'll do whatever you want. You give him money, he'll do whatever you want. Okay? And, this is what he's going to do. I mean, I think, like was said in the video, the chances of our going to war with Iran are pretty high. If it was a different president, there'd be some reasonable doubt that we'd have any chance at all of getting into this conflict. But with Trump in the White House, but here's the other part of this thing. Congress has to be the one to declare war, okay? So, if the Democrats cannot come together in Congress, for fuck's sake, and stand against Trump, all right, I don't see how they, how anything can be swaying Trump not to go to war, okay? You can't, a president cannot just by himself declare war, okay? That's not how it works. He's got to have the support of Congress to back him up. And if he can't get that, then if he does a war without congressional approval, that's grounds for impeachment. Okay? That's definitely grounds for impeachment, despite everything else that he's done so far that's pissed us off with the immigration crap. That alone would be enough to impeach a president and have him removed from office for having declared war against, our legal way of doing things, breaking the law, essentially, to wage war on a country. So, I don't know how the hell that's going to work as far as Trump wanting to do these things or trying to go to war. It's not going to be easy for him to convince the American people, even the MAGA people who are quietly, waiting to see what happens here and really are afraid to speak out against Trump here on this. They don't want war any more than the rest of us do, but they won't say it, because if to say it now while they have one of their own in the White House would be, committing a vast sin in their eyes, So it's just, it's going to test a lot of Americans' ability here to be able to stand on their principle. And for Democrats, it's not a big thing. It's not a big effort at all. But for MAGA, it's going to be a real bad time for them right now to try and defend a guy that they were told was not going to start any war, but is effectively aiming us toward it. Okay? So I don't see how the hell this guy is going to, how Trump is going to weather this with his own party. I mean, the longer it goes on, let's just say this. Even if MAGA is not talking now, okay, even if MAGA doesn't want to mention Trump's name in their ire against having a war, eventually if the war goes on long enough, they're going to come out against him. I mean, you've already got, you know, a handful already speaking, I never should have supported him. He broke his word with us and everything. You know, there's already people doing this now. Okay, how many more will do that as time goes on if we go into war with Iran? Okay, that's what I'm saying, is that time will tell. Time will be the ultimate decider here on how MAGA will either stand together or continue to fragment as they have been already. They will continue to splinter as Trump continues to do these egregious things, you know. So I just, like I said, it's really going to be an interesting time as we move forward here. What's going to happen if we enter war with fucking Iran? I don't get it. I don't understand why. Except maybe because Netanyahu knows how to play Trump so well. If it had been any other president, you know, there would be really no question about where we'd be in this, okay? There really wouldn't be any question at all about it. So I feel like, you know, hey, MAGA is going to have to learn things in a harder way than the rest of us ever did, okay? They arrogantly pushed this man into the White House, okay, despite all fucking evidence that the man was a fucking a traitor to the country, a criminal, a rapist, a liar. I mean, you name it. He's everything. Every fucking bad thing you can think of, that's Trump. Okay? They pushed this fucking wannabe dictator into the White House thinking all good things were going to come from him. And that hasn't happened. And they're acting like, no, they have happened. You know, yeah. How are you equating what he's done already up to now as being good? Okay, I don't see it. I don't see it, and nobody else does. Nobody is listening, you know, to you people's bullshit. Okay, nobody's listening to that. And you know, the fact that, you know, here we are on the eve of a fucking war after the MAGA people kind of insulted me and said that, oh, we're never going to have any wars under Trump. Well, A, he's already started a war in this country. Okay? That's considered a war. When you're waging war on a certain sect of our own society, that's a war. Okay? B, even when he ran as president, he flip-flopped all the time about war. Okay? And now here we are, you know, we could be seconds away from going into war with Iran, okay? And if he's such a peacemaker, why isn't he fucking doing everything that he can to stop it? He doesn't sound like the way he was acting, it's like, well, if it happens, it will be there, but you know, I can't do anything. It's not like he cares if there's a war that goes on over there. He doesn't care if the United States has to get involved in it. In his idea, at least it ain't my neck on the fucking line. Okay, but you know, so he doesn't care what you people in MAGA thought of him or what you thought he was. It doesn't matter now. Okay, all that matters is that he gets his way. That's all that matters, is that when he wants something done, he's going to get it done, whether you like it or not. And if he's going to kiss Netanyahu's butt and do what Netanyahu wants, which is to, you know, bring our troops over, boots on the ground, as they say. If that's what he wants, Trump will give it to him. Okay? And to hell with how MAGA deals with it. So you guys in MAGA, really, you know, you've been going through a lot of mental gymnastics since he became president again. You guys have been doing a lot of that this year. You must be getting tired of it. More so than the rest of us who have to listen to this shit. You guys are constantly having to adjust your tactics to try to justify why you voted for him. Okay? You see, if you picked the right person from the very beginning, you wouldn't have to do this. You wouldn't have to constantly be reevaluating where you stand. You wouldn't have to come up with ideas of how we can explain this away. You wouldn't have to spend all your time trying to lie about Trump and why you voted for him. Okay? None of that stuff would be happening right now if you just fucking did what, voted for Kamala Harris, who was the better choice. You guys wouldn't have to do that now. But you see what happens when you back an asshole? You're like in the parade, the people that have to sweep up after the elephants. Okay, that's what you guys are doing right now. Aren't you getting tired of the smell of shit all the time? Jesus. I mean, I'm telling you people, this is not going to end well for Trump, no matter how you want to think this. I mean, we're here only about half a way through his first year as president, and look where we are. Okay? In 3.5 more years, we still got to deal with this prick. And you guys, I mean, your brains are going to be so turned to mush by then because of all the time you spent trying to, explain Trump's bullshit. You're not going to be worth listening to. I mean, you're not now as it is, but you guys, your ideas, the political ideas and stuff are just going to be completely off the wall, as they've always been. So I feel bad for you guys because you couldn't have made the worst pick in your lives as a voter than Donald Trump. You couldn't have. Of everything that you said about, we know better who the president should be, this proves you don't. This man right here proves that you don't. He doesn't even stand for you anymore. But you guys are still out there parading for him. Where were all you people when it had his fucking military parade? A lot of you guys didn't show up, did you? So I know there's a lot of anti-Trump sentiment in MAGA right now. Okay, you guys are not happy with him, and rightly so. The rest of y'all, you're going to have to fucking decide in the coming days here where you want to stand, because when we go to war with Iran, and we will, okay, when we go and the bodies start coming back, okay, it's going to be just like Iraq all over again, okay? People are going to be so pissed off at the president at the time, and at that time it was George W. Bush, and like they said, his presidency has been defined by Iraq, by what went on there. Okay, that's the only thing people will ever remember about him. When it comes to Trump, the only thing people are going to remember about him are the goddamn immigration mess that he created, and this war here that we're gonna step right into. Okay, and all the fucking troops that we're gonna have to bury for that. And let's put it. I'm not trying to put aside the fact that a lot of women and children, innocent people in Iran, are going to die. When they've already died. I mean, there's many that already have. But if you guys don't think that that's a loss that we should worry about, you guys aren't even fucking Christian. You're not even candidates for humanity, as far as I'm concerned. If you don't care about who dies in a fucking war, if it's just them and not us, you guys, I mean, fuck you Christian my ass, okay? You guys can go to hell for all I care. But you're not that. You're not anything like that. Jesus would be so ashamed of you, it would be awful. But yeah, this is MAGA. This is Trump. This is everything that we didn't want to have happen in this country. We Democrats knew better. We had the better candidate. I don't care what you guys said about her. I know what it is that you didn't like about her, and frankly, it's sick. Okay, but the fact is, she was the better candidate by a mile than Trump. And we wouldn't be in this mess right now. We wouldn't have this fucking problem with the immigration crap. People wouldn't be afraid to come into this country. We wouldn't be looking out down the barrel of a war here with another country. We wouldn't be there. Think about that.